Hey everybody, thanks for clicking on this video, and I just want to get into a quick introduction here. I just got done watching the video from Jake on the channel Everything Black Powder, where he has discussed and showed shooting black powder made from balsa wood. And you know, myself, I was impressed at how clean it was after 8 or 9 shots, whatever it actually was. And as I've explained in previous videos, myself, when I'm on the shooting range, I don't swab in between shots. I don't go 4 or 5 shots and swab, because I use a spit patch. And for me, I can get through a 23, 24, 25 shot range without having to clean my gun barrel. And I believe it's because of the spit patch. Now I know, unless I missed it, Jake never really mentioned whether he used an oil patch or a spit patch. So anyhow, with that video in mind, living in Wisconsin several years ago, I got acquainted with a buckskinner that carved decoys from basswood. And at that time, I was doing a lot of bone carving, and he had recognized certain abilities that I have in carving bone, and decided to give me a chunk of basswood to try my hand at carving a duck decoy. Well, that never happened. So I've been holding on to this chunk of basswood for many years, and having watched Jake's video talking about balsa wood, it reminded me I had this chunk of basswood. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to char it up. I got a brand new char can. It's just a 1 gallon paint can. I've burned off whatever coating they put on the inside of these cans, and I have the basswood already chunked up into smaller pieces. And having seen some of the other videos that Jake has done, and also the gentleman from Hoffman Reproductions, they talk about having the Swiss formula, and one of the things that everybody seems to be gravitating to is charring your material with a slow burn. So I have my single brazier burner here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the fire as low as I can without extinguishing it. Just a propane burner is what I'm using here. And every half hour, or perhaps, I'm just going to turn the can over to a different side, shake it up a little bit so that I can mimic what would be a rotisserie burn on this particular batch of basswood. Now, the end result's going to be, I don't know. We'll just all have to wait and see. But I do want to make a comment, and I hope I don't upset a lot of people in making this. Now, I understand everybody wanting to know feet per second, getting the same density in pucking your powder, and all these things. And I have a chronograph, and at some point this summer, when I'm not so busy as I am right now, I'm going to go ahead and start experimenting with that batch of barberry I made that I milled for 30 hours. And I'm going to be experimenting with this at the same time. Now, for me, I'm not going to be overly concerned with achieving the same numbers through a chronograph that one might achieve with Swiss. Just simply because, and as I've explained earlier on this channel, I think in different terms than a whole lot of other people. Numbers don't impress me per se. For instance, if I can achieve 50 feet less per second with a basswood based gunpowder as opposed to like Swiss, well, 50 feet less, does that make you less dead or more dead? Is it going to change the way I hunt if I hunt with this gunpowder made out of basswood? No, it's not going to change anything. because you're just as equally dead at a bullet hitting you at 50 feet less per second as opposed to 50 feet per second more. And that's why I think in different terms. And as I just stated, it's not going to change the way I hunt with a muzzleloader. Because I may be able to achieve 100 feet more per second, I'm not going to take those longer shots with my muzzleloader. Just not going to do it. So, like I said, that's why I kind of think in different terms than a whole lot of other different people. But I am curious as to see what basswood will do as a charcoal for homemade gunpowder. And another reason why I'm doing this also is because those of you that have watched my Santa Fe Trail Rendezvous, I was invited to put on a seminar next year, 2024, in teaching and making homemade black powder. And this is just going to add to my repertoire of having made gunpowder from different types and various woods. But with that being stated, depending on how this batch turns out, I will probably more likely still stick with the local woods, junipers and barberries, and just, you know, experiment with those. So anyhow, I'm going to light the fire. I'm going to keep an eye on this, and then as the steps progress, probably the end result will just be me recording, shooting through the chronograph, with one exception, and I should mention right here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use Jake's formula of 77, 13, 10. But I've been using 75, 15, 11 grams of sulfur. So what I'm going to do with this particular batch, I'm going to go with the 77, 13, 11 on the sulfur. So the end result will be seen through the chronograph. And there again, numbers don't impress me. If you've got a bullet hitting you at 1,600 feet per second and the next bullet hits you at 1,550, are you less dead or more dead with that extra 50 feet per second? And in particular, with a round ball. So anyhow, we'll catch up with you when I get this process done, and we'll do some more communicating at that time. And as you can see, the paint can is just about full of basswood. So I'm going to get to work. So to kind of show you what I'm doing here, after having listened to the gentleman from Hoffman Reproductions reading Swiss's formula and how they do it, I gleaned from that some of us may be overcooking our charcoal, thus producing much more dirtier burning charcoal. I'm not going to say one way or the other whether we are or not, but having listened to how Swiss does it, it seems like right at that critical moment of your charcoal, you know, being black and still being a little bit of brown, might produce cleaner burning gunpowder. So I've shut the fire off, and I'm going through the can right now, and I'm actually crushing up some of the pieces so that I don't inadvertently overcook it. We'll see how that turns out, but let me show you what I'm doing to determine what needs to still be charred and what I'm actually putting into my I don't want to say tumbler, but that plastic PVC tube, and crushing it up into the powder. So here's a piece, and I'm pretty sure the camera's not going to be able to pick up the color difference, but this chunk of charcoal, as I broke it up, just at that light, I should say darker brown, turning to black. And with my pliers, it's pretty easy to break up. So I'm just breaking these pieces up, and I'm putting it into my crusher. And those that I can't crush up with the pliers will go back into the can once I cull through everything and put it on the burner for a little while longer. And like this is probably in part still a little too hard, although some of it is not. So I'm going to try to maintain this consistency with the charcoal to see if in conjunction with the basswood and the point of maybe cooking it too long might be able to produce a burner cleaning gunpowder. So it's going to take me a little time to do this because I've got quite a bit to do in this can. So I'll just check in with a update from time to time. So in order to maintain a consistency on this journey that I've been doing regarding making homemade black powder, I wanted to show volume-wise what 15 grams of basswood would be, which is on the right, and 15 grams of my junipers on the left. Now it should be noted that I have already 86'd all my willow, but you can go back on the channel and you can see some of the comparisons that I've done with the willow as opposed to junipers and the other woods that I've been using to make homemade black powder. And as you can see, 15 grams of basswood and 15 grams of my juniper charcoal mixed. They're pretty close to being equivalent in volume. Now, I will say and note at this point that the juniper charcoal is much more fluffier, I guess, than the basswood. And when I try to qualify this, when I opened up my jar of the juniper charcoal and put it into the smaller container to get a weight, the dust particles were very, very apparent. The dust particles just flew everywhere, and when I tried to get a lump of the juniper charcoal onto a spoon and into the smaller container, became very airborne. When it came to the basswood, I did not experience that whatsoever. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to empty the jar of the juniper mix, and I'm going to put some barberry, 15 grams of barberry, and do a side-by-side comparison with the basswood. And then I'm going to show you guys, hopefully, a little bit of difference in these charred woods. So stay tuned for that. Well, there you go. There's 15 grams of barberry, obviously on the left, and 15 grams of my basswood, obviously on the right. And I can tell you that the barberry, like the juniper, the particles of char dust are very light and fluffy and became airborne very easy, as opposed to the basswood. But as you can tell, volume wise, they're very comparable, and the camera's probably not picking it up as easily as I can see it when I hold the two jars side by side. The basswood is just a hair more dense. Now, whether that's because I charred the barberry and the juniper longer, I don't know. Because as I explained earlier, I charred the basswood just to the point of where it was just turning brown to black. And I'm going to show you here the difference. So wanting to show the difference in perhaps what may be charcoal overcooked for the charcoal portion of our gunpowder, you know, listening to the channel Hoffman Reproductions and what he was reading regarding the making of Swiss gunpowder, it was suggested, and I'll just reiterate right here, that they actually char the charcoal just from the point of going, you know, dark brown to black. And then that's when they're breaking up the charcoal and using it for the gunpowder, perhaps giving the illusion, and I can't say for certainty, that it's a much cleaner burning gunpowder. So what I want to just kind of show here is the pieces of wood on the left. On the top is a piece of oak, and the two bottom pieces are juniper. Now, there's a relatively distinction made between the cooking time of the charcoal, because you can see, and my finger's going to point to it, that the grain structures are breaking down. Would that be an indication that we're charring it too long? Now, I'm going to just flip this over a little bit, and you can kind of see what I'm referring to about the grain structures breaking down. You can see it also in that top piece of oak. You can see it splitting off right here and turning it over. Hopefully you can see it even further. Now, listen to the difference in sound as I drop these pieces of charcoal, which may be overcharred. They're very light sounding even. There's just no solidity to the sound. And I'm making this comparison because right here are the pieces of basswood, and as you can see, the grain structure has not broken down. Now, have I charred these thoroughly? Well, when I turn this piece over on its side, you can clearly see a notch. I took a pair of pliers and I broke that corner away to look at the internal to see if it was charred. And it obviously is. And that's the same thing's true with the bottom one. I just didn't take a chunk off it because it just all come out of the same can. And that top piece is the piece I just experimented on. Now, listen to the density difference in it. You can definitely hear that there's some solidity left to that wood as opposed to a comparable size of charcoal. Now, whether balsa wood maintains its shape in the charring process, obviously I can't answer that. Maybe Jake will do a video sometime in the future showing what the charcoal looked like with the balsa wood. So at this point, I already have a batch in the ball mill. I'm going to let it mill for as long as I need to. I did not make a double batch. I just made a singular batch because if this doesn't turn out, I don't want to, throw away another 77 grams of potassium nitrate just for a failed experiment. So anyhow, that's what I have right now. Stay tuned for the rest. Okay, this has been milling for 16.5 hours, and as you can readily see, the powder is neatly compacted the bottom of the container. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stir all of this back up, and I'm going to let it tumble for another hour and come back and see what it looks like, because I kind of want to stick with the same thing I did with that batch of barberry that I let mill for 30 hours. Well, it's been 1 hour later, and we can see that within that hour's time it has compacted again on the bottom of this drum. So I'm going to mix it up one more time. So this is 17.5 hours. I'm going to mix it up, give it 1 more hour. It'll be 18.5 hours tumbling, and then I'm going to go ahead and start compressing it into pucks, letting it dry and breaking it up, and hopefully sometime soon I can get out with the chronograph and start testing these gunpowders. Okay, so to answer a viewer's question underneath a previous video, he asked how I built my press. Well, this is going to be the lowdown, I guess. When they moved my modular home onto this property and they disconnected the trailer tongues from the main portion of the trailer, they asked me if I wanted to keep the steel. And since that's part of the cost of a modular home, I said, hell yeah, I'm paying for it. But over the years, I've been able to take this I-beam steel, and as I move around, you can kind of see that this is the I-beam steel right here. Now, over the years, I've removed by cutting the I-beam portion right here to get to the metal. And you can kind of see on this support here where I've cut it away, because I don't throw anything away when it comes to metal. I kind of keep everything. You never know when you're going to need it. And also the back strap is also a portion of that I-beam steel. And then when it comes to the plates, when you look at these trailer tongues, they have these supporting cross braces. Now I've turned these around so that they'll match, and welded everything back together, and I already had some of this channel iron that I use for front support. But basically for me, my only cost in all of this is a little bit of my time and the all thread. And the all thread is 5/8. As you can tell, it's double nutted, but it's more than sturdy enough for compacting this gunpowder. So that's how I did it. And I did make it specifically for the 12-ton jack. I know in previous videos I've made a mistake and said 20-ton, but it's actually a 12-ton jack. Now you may be wondering what I use for making my pucks. Well, as you can see stood up right there, most of us will recognize that that's a brass powder flask for charging either your rifles or your revolvers. Over the years, being a rendezvouser, I've collected a number of those. And so what I did is I cut one to length, figured out what I needed to make the puck, and then I turned this round piece of dowel, and you can see it's pretty good size. But what I did is I took a valve from an engine, and I ground down the valve so that it just fit inside the brass tube. And then obviously I'm using the valve in conjunction with this piece of wood right here to keep everything straight, and that also helps the valve from not bending also. So obviously I put a little bit of powder, moistened up gunpowder in that tube, and then I just take and I actually hand compress it first and just transfer that to the top of the bottle jack. And I have another small plate that actually sets on top of the bottle jack, and I've got all the measurements figured out so that as I work the jack, move the jack up, then that compresses my gunpowder, and that's how I make my pucks. So for the gentleman that asked the question how I made my press, that's how I did it. And I just simply use a clamp, and I just clamped that to the top of my table saw, which is a professional grade table saw. So I hope that answers your question, and I hope it gives someone else, an idea on how to make one of these. It's very simple, and for me, my only cost was just the all thread. Everything else was just scavenged steel. Okay, I'm going to get to work compressing that gunpowder that I made out of brass, and we'll catch everybody when it's time to do some shooting with it, and we'll see how it worked out. Thanks for watching this video. I certainly hope that you'll take a moment or two to like and subscribe, and to share it with your bestest of buds. Bye.